So up next, we actually have a duo presenting again. And I'm happy to introduce to you two speakers. The first one is Leigh Freund. And Leigh Freund is the president and CEO of the Network Advertising Initiative. And there she leads the organization's growth and, of course, sets the strategic priorities. Before she joined the NAI in 2015, she spent 11 years working at AOL and has more than a decade of substantive, well, this word was hard, substantive experience in privacy, advertising, and public policy. And she's joined actually by Alex Cone, who is Group Product Manager at Google. And prior to working at Google, Alex co-founded Quire, an ads privacy learning platform, and he also led privacy and addressability standards making at the IAB Tech Lab. And before that, he also held product management roles overseeing privacy, ad creative, video serving, and more at AppNexus and Xandr. So we have two professionals here that have a combined experience of probably plus 20-something years in online advertising and privacy and regulations. And we will hear more from them on their talk titled Collaborative Paths to Privacy Enhancing Advertising. Welcome with me, Leigh and Alex. Maybe too much coffee.
Well, thank you very much for that warm welcome. And I have to say, I am thrilled to be here. I was with some of you a few years ago at the Ad Filtering Dev Summit in Amsterdam, and I think the folks at AdGuard and IO invited me back because what I talk about is a lot different than the stuff that you'll hear for the rest of the day. So first of all, let me explain a little bit about who we are, and Alex and I are going to have basically a discussion on stage. So we're not going to give you a whole detailed technical presentation, and in fact, I have to say you all in this room are much smarter than me because some of the technical stuff you were talking about went a little over my head because that's not my area of expertise.
It's been really great content.
Yeah, no, yeah. I agree. I've learned a lot. But we're going to talk a little bit about the world that we come from, which is the advertising world. So first of all, let me give you just a little sense of who we are. So for those of you, you heard all of the titles, but I'll explain just a little bit about my organization and what I do. I am the head of the NAI, which is a trade association in the United States, and a self-regulatory organization that puts standards in place and helps companies comply with the plethora of legal and regulatory requirements in the areas of privacy. The other thing that our organization does, which we'll talk about quite a bit, is we advocate in public policy circles for responsible legislation and regulation that helps our companies be more privacy protective of their users. So that's the world that I come from, Alex.
And I think you guys probably know Chrome, but yeah, my background, as was mentioned before, I've kind of spanned this intersection of advertising and privacy, and now for the last 2 years have been sitting at Chrome and working on privacy enhancing technology in the browser. But I continue to be very active in a lot of the community around this, including W3C, but also the different advertising sort of industry forums where people are talking about privacy enhancing technologies and potentially better ways to act responsibly within the realm of advertising and privacy.
Great. So we come from a little bit of a different place in the world than maybe the rest of the folks in this room. We actually believe in data-driven advertising, or at least I won't speak for you, Alex, but I do. And I don't accept the premise that we can't do data-driven advertising and have privacy at the same time. So data-driven advertising is hugely important to the United States economy, to the world economy. You can see some of the statistics we put on the screen, but it drives a lot of jobs, a lot of revenue, and it really helps small businesses and small publishers. We heard a little bit from Henry yesterday about how content creators and smaller platforms and smaller businesses make money, and replacing advertising is a really hard concept on the internet. So we believe in it. My organization has been around for 25 years, trying to instill strong privacy standards for ad tech companies. And so we really try hard to have privacy-preserving technologies, privacy-preserving standards, and approaches to advertising that help data-driven advertising survive. And so we believe in it. We just think it could be better and safer. And so what Alex and I are here to talk about is to kind of give a little bit of a bridge to the really excellent and thoughtful work that you do, but also the work that our companies are doing to try to make things better for users. And in a nod to Peter, I'll just say we have our share of very interesting consumers sending us notes as well. And I'll just share with you that some of the most interesting ones are the folks that write to us and say, opt me out of everything. We really need to have our own privacy. My name is Sandra with the last name. My address is this. My social security number is this. And in case you need it, here's my credit card information.
Oh,
so,
God.
you know, which is scary. Anyway, any fun stories to share from that?
I was sitting next to Andreas, who works on the extension side of Chrome, and he was noting also the comments that we'll often get from people. I didn't have any specific examples, but
no
Peter,
PII.
Peter really won, I think, with that presentation on email.
We got swear words as well, but
Yeah.
you
We definitely get those.
definitely
Yeah.
showed us what those are like. So this is the area that we come from, and we just want to talk a little bit about kind of the work that we've both done on privacy-enhancing technologies, how there might be some bridges and pathways to work collaboratively to help make advertising better. And one thing that I know that I got a lot of positive feedback from the last time I was here was to talk a little bit about what's going on the policy world. So Alex can help me with this, but
She's the expert.
and I'm happy to talk later or on the stage if you have questions about the federal government in the United States. At the moment, we're in a shutdown, so it's good that I'm here in Cyprus because I don't really have a lot to do with the federal government in Washington. We're on day 24, in case anybody wondered. We have a Republican-led executive branch, a Republican-led Congress, Republican-dominant Supreme Court. And yet, even though we have kind of that level of synergy at the decision-making levels of Washington, we still can't get a privacy bill. We can't get any comprehensive privacy legislation coming out of Washington, and I do not see that changing at all.
Yeah, there's not a lot happening, even outside of the shutdown. But
Yes.
Other than at the state level, I would say.
Yeah, so I will say, though, the one thing that we have seen a little glimmer of hope on, if you're hoping for some privacy protective legislation or regulation to come out of the United States at least, is sectoral privacy. We're seeing a couple of different trends. One is sectoral privacy. So they seem to really care about kids. So there's lots of bills talking about kids' safety online and what we can do to make kids safer. And there's horrible stories that we've all heard about children who get manipulated or exploited online. And so the attempts to make children safer online, I think, are seeing some light of day. So look for potential enforcement in those areas from our Federal Trade Commission. The other trend, and then we can turn to the states, but the other trend that we're seeing, which I think is a really interesting one, is privacy as a national security concern. So we've had two things happen in the United States. We've had a bill that passed unanimously called PADFA, which now I'm going to, it's the Protecting Americans' Data from Foreign Adversaries Act, PADFA, which limits the bulk transfer of consumer data out of the United States to countries of concern. We also have a Department of Justice rule that is enacted and is being actively enforced against, which does some of the same things. And so the premise of that is that there are some serious national security concerns with the way data is flowing around. And so we are The NAI just actually made it a new requirement starting in 2026 for any NAI member company to follow those rules and we are going to do some auditing and checking to make sure that they fall within those rules and they're not sending data to countries of concern, none of those countries, I believe, are represented in this room. Anyway, should we talk about states?
Yeah, you should talk about states because that's at least in the US, that's where like most of the action has been, I think.
Yeah, so the states, we did not, unusually did not get a comprehensive privacy law from a state this year. We had lots of them become effective, but we didn't have one passed, which we were not expecting at the beginning of this year at all. But we do have 20 states that have enacted legislation and they're active in enforcement at the moment. And those states are, if you try to consolidate those into a couple of summations, there are new requirements for consumer choice. So everybody knows what a GPC is, the Global Privacy Control. California just passed a bill. It was signed by the governor last week.
566, I think.
AB 566, which requires that the Global Privacy Control be embedded in the browser. And maybe Alex can talk about Chrome's thoughts on that. Do you want me to stop?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is like sending a signal is a nice step, but anyone who's building a browser knows like what happens once people get the signal is a hard thing to still enforce. So a representation to a user that something is going to happen from that signal is a tough one to make. So I think like the way that we're thinking about it is how to present this to a user in a way where it's not something that overpromises what's going to actually happen. That said, I think organizations like NAI that are working to help companies try to comply with what the law is doing, or at least auditing to help people do the right things. And we're going to talk a little bit more about privacy enhancing technologies in a second. That could be a path, but I think the reality is like signal can be a good thing, but signal is not the whole story, right? I think sending a signal, you don't know what's going to happen on servers, and it's really hard to see.
Signals and implementations are two different things, and that's one thing we're working with NAI member companies to do is when you get a GPC signal, what does it mean to you? Does it get obfuscated through the data chain, and therefore you don't see it and then can't honor it? Or how are you honoring it, and what are you doing with it? And that's a lot of the work that we do with our companies. And we're hopeful that we also implemented our own GPC browser extension, which is in the Chrome store and a couple of other browsers that users, until the California law takes effect and the GPC is embedded in the browsers, you can use the browser extensions. So that's that. The other thing that we see across the states is sensitive data restrictions. And so sensitive data takes many forms, as you all may know, from location data to, in particular, health data. And more health data is being hoovered up by smartwatches and other apps, and all of those are creating new discussion points for whether or not things are sensitive in the health category. We used to have something called HIPAA, which is health information that is between a patient and a medical provider, and that was what health information was. Now it's, do you read an article on WebMD? Is that sensitive health information, just the fact that you read the article? So we're having lots of discussions around sensitive health information and how companies use that information for advertising. So that's what's happening at the states. I think that all of that means that companies have to better understand their data flows, and they have to implement technologies, and this is where we get to kind of pets, that regulate that data use, and in particular, as we mentioned with GPC, with downstream data partners in order to remain compliant. Just a quick note globally. Globally, we continue to see a strong focus on privacy protections. That's not, you all know that already. But I think it's interesting, different cultural norms mean conflicting and complicated privacy compliance challenges for global companies. And if you take the most restrictive path, then obviously there are lots of companies who would not be able to be in business. So trying to figure out what that right pathway is for responsibly protecting data, but also being in compliance with all of these laws with different definitions is really hard. We are also, though, are seeing a little bit of some reconsideration in Europe, especially with the UK, on what on use cases that maybe, we talked a lot earlier in the day. Yesterday, there was some discussion about cookie banners and how annoying they all are, and so the UK the UK ICO is considering, what can we do with cookie banners? Are there some low-risk use cases that are in the advertising world, such as measurement or attribution or frequency capping? Are there use cases that maybe we don't need that layer to confuse a consumer that could be allowed or not? So they're having that discussion now, and I think there is the EU is listening to that discussion.
Yeah, the EC is kind of open the same consultation, or the European Commission's open the same consultation effectively.
Yeah, although they come at it from a very different
Yes.
cultural perspective. So I think those are discussions that are worth listening to. But I think, the premise of what Alex and I wanted to talk about today is how implementing privacy-enhancing technologies can help companies navigate this morass of challenging policies, differing laws, different definitions, ensure that consumer rights are being honored, and kind of help companies and consumers protect their data. So let's talk about pets.
Yeah, so I don't want to make any assumptions of where people are on the spectrum of knowing about various privacy-enhancing technologies. So I just wanted to start with how I think about it. I think part of the issue around pets is misunderstanding from different folks. There's engineering crowds who deeply get privacy-enhancing technologies. There's policy-making crowds that hear the word thrown around for things that probably wouldn't be considered privacy-enhancing technologies. My mental model is the ingredients versus the thing that you make. In the advertising realm, at least, a lot of people will call the thing that you make, the soup, the privacy-enhancing technology, when in reality, privacy-enhancing technologies are like any other technology. They're just ingredients to an overall product. You can have more or less of those ingredients, and the output product can be more or less private. But yeah, so I think that's how I think about it. We'll talk a little bit about what a few of the popular ones within digital advertising are in a second. I did want to ask you, Leigh, because there's a link here. NAI just put out a primer on pets. Why are you guys thinking about it? Why was it important enough to spend time?
Thanks for the question. I think, so we did just put out a primer. It's linked here. I think we'll share the slides, but I'm happy to provide the link. It's available on our website. I think it doesn't necessarily, the audience for our primer on pets isn't very smart developers necessarily, but what it was meant to be is lay kind of ground rules and common definitions across the different technologies that Alex and I will talk about, so that people involved in the advertising industry can all speak from the same playbook and speak with the same language. So definitions, use cases, understanding where in the data flow these privacy-enhancing technologies work. Alex mentioned layering them to make things more protective or less protective, and we've even heard during these couple of days about how layers can provide vulnerabilities. But how they all work together, where there might be those vulnerabilities, what they're missing, and how we speak about them. And so I think there's a lot of policymakers and a lot of compliance personnel and even lawyers who advise companies in our space that are just hearing the buzzwords and are talking about them. So our primer was meant to kind of demystify what we're all talking about so that we can speak from the same language and understand where in the data chain they are. Thanks.
Yeah, because to me, it could be really actually bad if the outcome is, people who aren't actually implementing strong privacy-enhancing protections label their things as pets.
And there's a lot of that going on, I believe.
Yeah, it could end up, and researchers point that out, or the community points that out. It's going to sink a lot more than just those the efforts of those companies. It's like anyone who's trying to do like advance the ball with pets, like could also be sort of like set back by the actions of others. So yeah, it's like super important. Really quick, probably some of you are deeply familiar with different privacy enhancing technologies. I just wanted to mention some that are popular in digital advertising right now. I think the most popular sort of combination at the moment is DP, differential privacy and trusted execution environments, or DP and multi-party computation. Differential privacy, for those who aren't familiar, is really a way to mathematically add noise, like structured noise, to a data output so that you cannot say whether an individual is in or out of a data set. This actually makes a ton of sense for use cases like measuring ad performance. You don't really need to know whether one user was in or out of a data set to be able to understand, is the money that I'm spending on advertising effective?
By the way, that's a really important part of digital advertising. The advertisers need to understand where that ad was served and what its performance was. And so it's really important that type of use case be preserved.
For sure. And I think also it's not just for advertisers, right? If you think about, I talk to a ton of people who build sites, who like and pay for their like what they're doing in part through advertising. And if you think about what they're up against, they want to be able to go to people who are running advertising and say, hey, when you advertise on my site, like it is effective, or when you advertise on the sites that I build, it is effective, so that you get more advertising spend on your site. So it's not just important for advertisers to know, hey, how I'm spending my money is effective. It's actually important for the sites that are serving ads because they want to see more money come to them, which I think is something that like everyone would like to have happen, but like having that be able to happen in a way that doesn't expose individual user like data is sort of like a holy grail. I think just really quick on sort of layering with T's or multi-party compute. I think with T's, the interesting piece is like isolation and hardware, which is great. To me, the attestation ability of like to know what code is running inside of that environment and be able to give receipts is a huge piece of like the puzzle, because you can say something is differentially private, but if you can't inspect what's going on in a server that's processing it, then you're going to have to trust somebody that it's.
But you need to trust and verify.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's like a verification piece.
Yeah.
And multi-party compute, sort of a different approach to that, but like cryptographic technique where people can put data together, but no individual party that didn't have access to the data anyway can't like see some other piece of data, but they can get an aggregate sort of outcome.
Where are clean rooms on that list?
Okay, yeah, so exactly. Like clean rooms is one of the buzzwords in the ad land that's like, oh, these are pets. There are clean rooms out there that I know of that like do implement differential privacy, that do run in trusted execution environments, that do actually like expose what their epsilon value is for differential privacy. There are also those that do none of that and still name themselves a clean room, and thereby like have this transfer property of like, oh, we're a pet, which is actually why I think it's really important to get like people within the ecosystem, and not just engineers and people building products, but like policymakers, legal folks, understanding that, hey, not all products that are built on top of pets are created equal. This is just a really quick my mental model for like, at least within digital advertising, you either get pets that are baked into existing products, or pets that are like layered on through vendors who offer products that like have pets built in, and you're either using some combination of open source, rolling your own, or like in the case of one thing that I wanted to talk about, I know we're running short on time, but like one of the collaborative spaces that some of you will know about is at W3C, there's a conversation around an interoperable solution for attribution. So a measurement like,
That works across all browsers.
well, if all browsers implement, there's a good sign that several are very interested. One is that like one of the co-authors of the current specification is Mozilla. We're working on it, is Chrome. It's had inputs from Safari. I think there are probably people in this room who've like inputted into that working group. Tying this all together with the policy stuff, what you guys are, or many of you are trying to achieve, and like the potential for like private advertising, I do think Leigh mentioned earlier, policymakers and tech people are looking at measurement as a lower harm thing, particularly if you can demonstrate that you're not identifying individual users because like you're not building a profile.
Right, and that's a really important point, is data responsibility and data governance and what you do with the data.
Yeah.
You all know this, is extremely important.
Sure.
And it's important that you don't misuse or exploit data just because you have it. You can only use it for the things that you're using it for.
Right, which is a hard problem to solve, right? So it's actually, it can be easier just to cut it all off, right? But I think the bridge here, though, is if, and I think those of you who operate and run like content blocking, ad blocking, I'm listening to the presentation from a colleague from NYU earlier, right? Like there is this still sort of nuance, right? Of like, well, we don't want to completely cut off funding to the open web. Some users absolutely want to protect their privacy as much as possible, but they might actually prefer not to get scammy ads. Like how do we kind of balance that? And I think you guys sit in an interesting position in the same way that you've used acceptable ads as a bar to get people to act better on like the ad formats front. I think you also sit in a place where you can potentially incentivize people to in your environments, maybe not every like with every user setting in an ad blocker, but like maybe there is some like acceptable setting for, hey, we'll let, if companies are trying to measure the effectiveness of advertising through a pets-based API or pets-based product, like we'll like attest that they're acceptable, right? Like I'm giving you some ideas because I think there is an opportunity to like bridge some of what's going on in the advertising world, the technology world as it relates to pets, the policy world, and then what you guys do.
Yeah, I think, I'll use sensitive data as an example for that, right? Ads that are focused on sensitive data, there could be some real collaborative opportunities with ad filtering to make sure that those laws that are enforcing strict requirements are met. So I think there's lots of ways to, for our two worlds to intersect and collaborate. We're on the same side. We want privacy for consumers. And we think that through some of the orgs that I've listed here and through continuing to have these kind of dialogues at each of our different circles is really important. So I think we're pretty much out of time, but we'd be happy to answer any questions.
For sure.
I think we are. Yeah.
Think up front.
Yeah, and here too.
Oh,
thank you.
Over there.
Thank you. And well, forgive me if you actually told about this. I might have missed. But so you mentioned that, of course, what you do with the data is important.
Yeah.
Do you think there is like a realistic way to enforce this on the companies?
So I'll give my view, and then you can add on, Alex. Sure. I think the answer is I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was a path, right? I think there is. I think that it involves smart brains coming together and putting in place standards, either voluntary or somehow enforced through self-regulatory orgs or otherwise. And what we need, though, is proof. You need an audit trail. So there is, we've talked about various iterations of this at Tech Lab and other places over the years. But I do think that there is a way to prove or to use a standard that allows data to be, shown how it is used throughout the ecosystem. And then even if it's my members, I think the bad actors shouldn't be doing what they're doing. I don't know, Alex, if you have a better answer for that.
I mean, I think it takes all different types of paths. Like, I think the work that you guys do, like, is an important choice for users to be able to make to use the tools that you're building. Like, and that in and of itself is like somewhat of an enforcement mechanism. It maybe precludes like incentivizing using privacy enhancing technology because you're like, throw your hands up, well, I'm already blocked, like I can't do anything. But I do think that that's part of the, like, actually think it takes all kinds. One of the things that I've been optimistic about is even if companies don't care about privacy, they often care about protecting commercial data. And privacy enhancing technologies, you actually see an uptick in people using like, this idea of a data collaboration platform to do like measurement because
to preserve first-party data.
Yeah, they want to get the outcome, but they don't actually want to hand their competitor their data, right? And that may be cynical, right? Like, well, they should have done it because it's the right thing to do. But like, I also think it's not the worst thing in the world when incentives align with other goods, right? So like, if companies wanting to act in a data protective manner results in
better commercial interests,
results in better user outcomes, that's not the worst thing. It would be great if folks, only did the thing for user privacy. But I think that's one of those examples of where you don't even necessarily need enforcement. You need incentives to be aligned. But I do think enforcement, like, that's why I mentioned if you're already blocking, but you have some like standard that you say, well, we'll let certain things through if they're doing X, Y, Z, that is also like a potential path to get more of this stuff adopted, if you believe in it, which I realize some people may.
And I'll also just say the enforcement folks should enforce. I think California in the United States is starting to step up. They have hundreds of investigations going on, but the most anybody has ever been fined, in California, which is relatively new in terms of their enforcement, is $1 million. To some of these companies, that's nothing. There's not been a lot of enforcement of the GDPR on the scale that we would have liked, I think, to see, because, we don't want to have bad actors acting either. And our view is that companies or organizations like the NAI help the enforcers by keeping the standards high, but the bad actors should be enforced against. And I really wish the regulators would enforce, period.
Did you have yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for the talk. Very interesting. I have a very quick question regarding this GPC signal and this new legislation. I somehow missed it in the news. So as far as I understand, browsers now have to provide a way to send it, right? Does the legislation contain anything for the websites, for the other part? Are they obliged to follow this signal? And if they are, then what are the limitations? What exactly are we like?
It's a really good question. So the browsers are required to implement it, and it's through the GPC that consumers can exercise their privacy rights in California, which is really the de facto United States law at the time. So I would say that if websites or publishers don't send that signal in an ad bid,
like pass it along.
If they don't pass it
vendors,
along, then there's nothing that consumers can see or enforce against, and so therefore that would, I think, one thing that has changed in most of my time working in ad tech, the third parties have been the primary scapegoats, if you will, and not for not good reason, but they've been the ones that have usually been required to provide the choice and the notice and to turn off the targeting or whatever. But now those obligations, at least in California and in a lot of the states that we're seeing, are spread across the ecosystem. So websites are going to be held responsible for it. In fact, there was just a settlement in California against Tractor Supply Company, which is a big You may know, who's heard of Tractor Supply Company? Probably. Oh yeah, good, yay. Yeah, the USA people, right? It's a big farm supply website, and they didn't have the requisite notices on their site, and they got enforced against by California. So that's a long way of saying yes.
It also, it does appear, and like talking to people in the space that are looking at these heuristics, like I think a lot of the enforcement is starting with clicking like a GPC button and then looking who is, as a proxy for who is honoring it, who is setting and reading like cookies on device or storing things on device. It's not that the law specifically says you can't do that, but that is typically or I should say, I think it's often the heuristic that enforcers are looking at
for simple.
Like, oh yeah, I said this, and I still see 60 companies setting and reading third-party cookies. I think there's one in the back. I don't know if we've gone way over time.
Henry, will you?
No.
Yeah.
We're done.
Sorry.
We can talk after.
Totally speak later. Yeah, because we're running.
I'm going to go down the stairs.
10-15
Thank you guys
minutes over, so.